Hey everybody, Daniel here, and today I'm going to be sleeving my Magic the Gathering deck using these custom-made Dragon Shield sleeves that my buddy Ben got me. I'm a big fan of the video game Doki Doki Literature Club, and Ben came across a piece of art of one of the characters wearing a Superman shirt, and if that doesn't fit me, I don't know what does. I guess in this instance the S stands for Sayori. I believe the artist for this piece was one StormBlaze. I'm going to make sure to link their Twitter account in the description below. That way, if people feel so inclined, they can go give them some love. I was actually thinking of commissioning some art from them myself, even thinking maybe I'll get them to design a new profile picture for this YouTube channel. I don't know how many of you who follow my YouTube videos play Magic the Gathering. This is a deck called Pox for the format of Legacy. This particular version is a Sedgemoor Witch Chain of Smog combo that lets me create infinite tokens, which I think is a lot of fun. And I just threw in Orcish Bowmaster because the card is too broken to not play before it gets banned. I said I was going to find a way to put these sleeves onto my YouTube channel. I didn't know how at first, but then I thought, you know, I'll do a sleeving video where I answer some questions I've been getting. I've gotten a few across some of my videos and a couple via PMs and even a few on social media. So I thought, you know, some of these questions I really don't feel like doing a whole video for. I don't feel like I have enough content to turn them into a video right now. So I'll just go ahead and answer them right now. So if you've asked me a question, I'm probably going to answer it here. So stay tuned for that. Now, one of the first questions I ever got was, how strong do you think Superman is? What do you scale him to? And honestly, I think there's strong arguments for scaling Superman all over the place. Comics are notoriously inconsistent. I believe at the time I said that he's multiversal at a bare minimum. But if you want to get real, I actually think Death Battle did a pretty good job scaling Superman in their most recent Goku vs. Superman video, which is the whole reason I started making videos on this channel in the first place. While I think some of their Dragon Ball scaling can be a little dubious or a little all over the place, I think they did a pretty good job with Superman. He has a lot of outerversal feats, a lot of multiversal feats, depending on if you want to use, you know, dimensional scaling or if you want to use, you know, volume scaling. And Infinite Frontiers has made it really easy to get a lot of those like higher ends justified because, you know, everything is canon. And even my most recent video talked about some of the absurdity and like Jason Aaron's run on Action Comics and just really what that could mean scaling wise. But if somebody really wanted to scale him much lower than that, I mean, there's plenty of times he's been knocked out by some, you know, pure nonsense. And that's really the thing when it comes to power scaling is a lot of times people just end up talking past each other because they just can't agree on what the standard should be. And with comic books, it's even a little bit harder because, you know, the power scaling isn't as linear as with something like maybe manga or video games. Sort of a follow-up to the previous question is, are you still making your How Strong is Superman video? And the answer is yes, but that comes with a few caveats. The first being is I think that a lot of way better YouTube channels have already covered that question. And I just really don't want to step on any toes, and if I'm going to do it, I want to be able to, you know, make sure to put my own unique spin on it. Like I covered the infinite weight feats because I thought, you know, I had a sort of a funny script and, you know, sort of a unique perspective on it, and thought that I could make that video my own, that subject my own. And if we're all just going to be quoting the same feats, you know, it starts to feel a little samey, and I would much rather just link their videos and go check these guys out. They covered it way better than I could have. The second caveat is it's just going to take a lot of time. Like, there are a lot of feats I'd like to cover, but I want to make sure I actually, you know, either have the comic or can quote and read the full comic. And that might involve me having to go back into histories of other comics now as well. So it's probably going to be a lengthy video. It'll probably be a multi-parter. And my initial plan was to sort of like do a build up to that anyway. Like I was going to start with the infinite weight feats and then like go to feats that are, you know, beyond infinite weights, and then just sort of build up on it over time was sort of my initial idea. And the third caveat is there's just other things that I want to cover. Like when I started this channel, it was just, you know, hype up a death battle. And then I started making some Superman videos, but there's other subjects I want to talk about. There's other stuff that I'm into. Even if Superman's like my, you know, primary fandom, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I have actually started working on it. Like there's some initial script ideas, but it's really going to be sort of a project. Sort of leads us to a question I got from a buddy of mine. What are my plans for this channel? And the truth is I really just didn't have any. I just had a couple ideas and I rolled with it, and I'll just, I'll see what happens from there. There are some versus topics I want to go over. I want to go over some character bios and do some comic reviews too. This is just sort of a hobby for me. It's a way to pass the time. I don't do this for a living. It's just something that I do for fun. So I'm just gonna make videos that I think are fun to make, unless like something really takes off, and then maybe I'll have to like reconsider and switch gears. But he was even nice enough to ask like, how can I support this channel? And I just laughed. I was like, I have 100 subscribers. You can support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. That's pretty much it. Anything else would really be like a down the road discussion. If you're really hyped on me, I also have a podcast that I'm going to link in the description, where a buddy of mine and I, we talk about horror novels. We're really into the spooky books, especially like Stephen King. So if you also want to go there and cheer me on, feel free, but like there's no obligation. You don't have to check out everything I put out into the universe. Next up is one that I believe I answered pretty well in the comment section, but I thought I'd go ahead and recover it here, and it's is Superman weak to nuclear radiation? Now, as far as I can tell, this belief that Superman is weak to nuclear radiation comes from 3 different sources. One being Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, another one being from a run on the New 52's Superman/Wonder Woman, and finally, we have Batman v Superman, which was heavily inspired by Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. Now, I believe the question stemmed from a debate primarily focusing on the Superman Wonder Woman run. So that's where I'm going to pay most of my attention, but I will just say that one of them is a movie adaptation heavily influenced by an Elseworld story where Superman is heavily depowered for the sake of the narrative. So that one's really not even worth addressing, at least in my opinion. The argument seems to be that because Superman looks skeletal after the nuclear explosion, that it's obviously a weakness for him. But that's really just ignoring a lot of the context of the story. So what happens is Zod and Sayori, after being powered up by the sun god Apollo, they decide to throw Superman and Wonder Woman into a nuclear reactor, and Superman is just too weak to fly out of there, and they use the last bit of their strength to use one of Wonder Woman's swords to split an atom so they can escape. Superman wrapped Wonder Woman in his cape and shielded her from the majority of the blast after they had already been beaten nearly to death. But if that's really just not enough for you, here's the panel where Sayori just straight up says that they put him in there to shield him from the sun. And here's one where Superman says he needs to fly up to the sun so he can recover. I don't know how much more clear the story could make it. The only one that they say the radiation poisoning might affect was Wonder Woman, and it didn't do anything to her. Next up is sort of a doozy. It's a series of questions, really more asking me how I would respond to certain arguments that were made in a video that was a debunk on a Goku vs. Superman video, or the topic in general. They told me I didn't have to call out the channel or do a debunk or anything like that. They didn't want to stress me out, and I was like, that's fine. I'll watch the video and I'll look at the questions that you have, and I'll tell you how I'll respond. Because a lot of them are just sort of really, standard ones that I run into in the whole Goku versus Superman debate as it is. So I've heard a lot of these questions before, so I'll talk about them. I'm not going to do any debunks on this channel because I kind of find debunks to be part of the toxicity in the versus battle community. It's just debunks on top of debunks, when really it's just people talking past each other. And, I'll get into that in a minute. I made fun of the whole concept of the debunker a few videos ago, and even I've fallen victim to it. In my Superman Infinite Strength video, I talked about an opinion that Animation Rewind had, and I honestly even sort of regret even going that far, poking fun at one point. So I'm not going to be doing things like that on here very much anymore. I might respond to specific questions, but that's about it. I want to remain mostly positive on this channel. I'm fine poking fun at each other every once in a while, as long as it's all in good fun. But if things ever get toxic, I'm just going to ignore it. So the first one is, Superman is not a skilled fighter just because it was stated in a comic that he was trained. Where are the feats to back it up? And to this one, I just have to ask, like, what do you want? Do you need him doing judo throws and karate chops? Because, I mean, that's not really what his power set is about. Do you want him to have a high win ratio? Because he has that. But say somebody comes up to you and says only people who are really skilled in BJJ and grappling are good fighters, and then you show them Goku, well, they'll look at that character and go, well, he's not a good fighter. And, you know, that's going to come off as ridiculous to you. So you see, we're already talking past each other. But we do have stuff like Superman being extremely proficient in pressure point combat, to the point where General Zod was having him train an entire Kryptonian army. There's the time he was able to fight off General Zod and the Eradicator at the same time despite being blind. He could post about his various encounters with Batman and Wonder Woman, and how he fared in each of those. We can talk about the times he's used his powers in creative ways, combining heat vision, frost breath, pressure points, super speed. But it's all really going to circle back around to me asking, why are we questioning the statements? Is it because you don't like them, or because you actually doubt them? Superman has an extremely expansive history, and when you've been around for 80 years, that just sort of happens. You get a laundry list of stuff to pull from, and I have to ask, at what point are you going to accept it? And if I accept it after, 3 or 4 examples, but you won't accept it until like 80 plus examples, well, then we're going to end up talking past each other most of the time, and the debate honestly just isn't worth having. But that's where I stand on it. Everyone's going to have their own opinions on it. You will never hear me say that Superman is as good of a fighter as Goku. I don't think he's as good of a fighter as a lot of fictional characters. But to say, after all of his history and all the people he surrounds himself with and everything that he does to protect the world he lives in, that he doesn't at least know how to fight on some decent level, to me is just kind of ridiculous. Next up, we have Superman's flight speed does not account for his fighting speed. Claims there is no comic where Superman fights at the speed he can fly at. Now, this one I could probably do a whole video on, but I can make it a little bit short here. First, I'd have to ask, do you accept that Superman is moving at the speed we're talking about? If you disagree with that, then we're already talking past each other. If you accept that, then do you also accept that Superman can and has very often stopped on a dime? Because if you don't, then we're talking past each other again. And then I would have to ask, do you accept that Superman flying at these ludicrous speeds can also avoid all the celestial bodies in space, or do you believe that he is flying through planets and stars and asteroids and just destroying everything with, not a care in the world? Because if that's your belief, I disagree, and now we're talking past each other again. But if you accept all that, I then have to ask, do you not believe he can throw punches while he's doing it? Or see punches coming? I don't understand this on a logical level. Superman has fought and flown before, there are examples. But if you're just gonna say there's no proof he's fighting and flying at his maximum speed there, okay, that's fine. But it'd be like me saying, well, weaker Z fighters have seen the stronger ones be able to fight before, so that there's no proof that they're fighting at the same speeds. It's just us ignoring narrative beats to be nitpicky. Superman has statements, he has feats. The only real alternative I see is Superman can move at infinite speeds, but just can't throw a punch when he does it, and I just disagree. And lastly, we have Superman's lifting strength does not mean anything when it comes to his fighting strength. And this YouTuber gave the example of the world's strongest man losing to Muhammad Ali, because while the world's strongest man may be stronger, that doesn't equate to fighting. And this is one of those things that's sort of true, but not really, but it is. To make a long story short, the power of a punch comes from its speed and the mass behind that speed. Which, if we're using, one-to-one examples, That would involve us figuring out which character can move faster and then which character weighs more, and that's the one that's going to be throwing the heavier punch. But a lot of fighters train the explosiveness of their punches, and they do that through lifting weights. They just try and do that without gaining unnecessary mass. But to me, this one comes off as a little disingenuous for a couple of reasons. The first being it's sort of ignoring the author's intent. The intent to me always seems pretty clear. It's that they're lifting these incredible weights to show how much their bodies can handle and how strong they are, or their progressions of strength. But if you want to bring more versus battle logic into it, it's also showing how much pressure their body can handle, how much weight they can move, how much force they can exert in a single movement. That could be handy for things like tackling or even flying through somebody. The last reason I really don't like the phrasing of this scenario is that it pits one of the best fighters of all time against somebody who is completely untrained, which I think is just a little bit disingenuous. But I also feel like it doesn't really account for the actual disparity of strength we're talking about here, at least when it comes to somebody lifting a finite amount of weight versus somebody who's possibly lifting infinite amounts of weight, which I assume is the argument here. I think a better example would be, Conor McGregor versus the Mountain. If you've ever seen that video, it's kind of hilarious. Conor McGregor's bouncing around and the Mountain's chasing him, but it just seems like Conor's not really doing anything to him. But if you're super intent on using Muhammad Ali, one of my favorite fighters of all time, alright, to describe the disparity of, strength we're talking about here, I think it would be more apt to say, Muhammad Ali versus a bear. But even that's not really cutting it. So we'd have to go Muhammad Ali versus a tsunami, or Muhammad Ali versus a comet. At least if we're both accepting, the levels of lifting strength that each of us have in mind. And again, as I've said from the beginning, if we're not, we're already talking past each other. So what's the point? That's just how I would respond to these specific arguments. And after watching the videos, I have to admit that they'd probably have some rebuttals ready to go. The videos were well made and well articulated. It's just that I have, specific things to say about these arguments. And even so, I'm sure there are things that could be said about what I said. So, at the end of the day, this is just something I like to talk about for fun. And the video was honestly well made and well articulated, and I kind of enjoyed watching it. It gave me some stuff to think about, honestly. And maybe one day I'll do a deeper dive into it. But I've been rambling for way longer than I intended. It was honestly good fun interacting with everybody and getting to answer a couple of these questions. And I'm so happy I finally got to sleeve this Magic deck. Thanks again to my best buddy Ben, the little alliteration for him in case he made it this far. Maybe I'll bring him on sometime and he and I can play some Magic. Anyway, that's been Daniel with Truth, Justice, and all of that nonsense. I'll catch y'all next time.